A view from the forest. This story happened to me in 2016. I bought myself a car this year, an old Nissan Primera, and since it was my first car, I decided to show it to my friends. The 4 of us gathered. I don't want to give you their real names, and I won't. And so we decided to test my car in action. We drove somewhere towards Minsk. It's not a long drive to Minsk, about 30 minutes. But that wasn't our goal. We just wanted to have fun. So we've been eating for an hour, 2, 3, and I already know something's wrong. We should have been in Minsk a long time ago. At first, I didn't tell the guys. I didn't want to cause a panic, so to speak. But when the 4th hour passed, I couldn't stand it and told my friends, to which they laughed. And one told a story about an abandoned car track. He said that Minsk was often attacked a long time ago, back in the days of the kings. And then the Minsk king went to the witch and asked her to make sure that Minsk would stop being attacked. The witch agreed. She came out of her cabin and walked along the path, whispering something. When they reached the river, the witch turned to the king and said, "If anyone goes this way, the devils will take him away and leave the horse, so that anyone who passes by immediately knows that he does not have long to live." And of course, we laughed. We drove for another 30 minutes, and we see a car on the side of the road. The old one. The window is broken. The doors are open. And then I really felt uneasy. And we were also running out of fuel. We drove for another 5 minutes and we see a horse. Well, I don't even know how to describe it. The horse's bones melted like a living horse. It was as if the skin and meat had escaped, but the bones hadn't. And then we hit the gas. I was squeezing everything out of the car. And we drove like that for 10 minutes. And everything. There is no fuel. We're sitting in the car. Scary. And we stood at the very edge of the forest. I looked into the woods for a second and then turned away. But after a moment, I was suffocated by fear. I saw a face in the woods. I understood that. That's why I was afraid to look there again. I was looking at the road when my friend screamed. Although not. He screamed. He was shouting that someone was coming to the car. I looked into the forest. God, I will never forget what I saw. A small creature with the height of a baby was running towards us. And you know what's the scariest part? The unknown. It jumped on the car and screamed, shaking her back and forth. And it was at that moment that I lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital. I was told that my friends and I got drunk and drove into a tree. You know, I really want to believe that, but my friends saw it too. Unfortunately, our friend got into a nut job, the hospital, and all because he's the only one who held on to the last. And he got us out. It's a pity that I won't be able to ask him how he did it. It's too small a story. Here's another one for you. Couldn't we get closer somehow? I asked, taking off my heavy backpack, which was filled with both useful things and all sorts of unnecessary nonsense, and weighed, as it seemed to me, about half a ton. No, my friend, no way. You can see for yourself. You can't squeeze through here on foot, let alone transport. Valera replied and, following my example, also freed himself from the burden that he had been carrying on his shoulders all this time. We've been trudging through this damn forest for 2 hours now. Even though you said the hut was just around the corner. Andrew grumbled and looked accusingly at Valera, and then sat down on a fallen tree trunk. Don't whine, there's nothing left. 20 minutes and we'll be there, Valera muttered. And then he took a bottle out of his backpack and began to zealously drink its contents, in large gulps. Hey, Vala, or maybe we're lost? I asked the question, looking around and noting that this forest area scares me a little. There was a certain sense of anxiety, and I myself did not understand what it was related to. Although Valera warned that the place where we were going was teeming with various anomalies and oddities, it would seem that the forest was like a forest, of which there were many around. but something was wrong with it. Firstly, there was not a single sound. Only sometimes, somewhere nearby, the trees creaked so that it seemed that one of them was about to collapse with a crash and crush us. Secondly, this area of forest was so dense and overgrown with shrubs and grass that it was extremely difficult to move, which is why we trudged for some time in almost one place. Although from the place where we left the car and to the destination is no more than 3 kilometers, as Valera claimed. Well, the third and strangest thing was that it was terribly cold in this place. So much so that I naturally began to shake. Although when we left the car it was incredibly hot outside. In addition, it could be noticed that the sun's rays literally refused to penetrate through the crowns of the trees, which made it feel like there was always semi-darkness here. Val wanted to say something, but Andrew interrupted him. By the way, what kind of cabin is this? And how did you even find out about it? What is it? He asked, finishing his sandwich and washing it all down with hot tea from a thermos. It's quite a long story, but if you're really interested, I can tell you on the way. In order to dilute the boredom a little and distract from the monotony of this place. Agreed, Andrewka summed up, after which deathly silence fell. We sat in complete silence for a while, each thinking about his own thoughts. Then Valera made it clear that it was time to move on, because it was good to sit, but still we would like to get to the hut as soon as possible, and then we can relax. We nodded in silence and, taking our luggage, followed our leader. Do you still want to know the history of this house? Our guide asked, looking down. That's it, Andrew said enthusiastically, who was walking in front of me, sometimes whipping me in the face with branches of bushes, which he pushed aside to get through them, from which I gradually began to rage. This forest area is so ancient that some believe it has existed since the beginning of the universe. For as long as humanity can remember, this forest has always existed. Many legends and tales were built around him, many of which can be found on the World Wide Web, and few people even remember about some of them. But that's not the point. It is rumored that strange and terrible creatures, demons, witches, warlocks and other evil spirits live in these places. Some claim that the gates of hell are located here. Others say that representatives of other civilizations flock here. There are also those who believe that this piece of land is cursed. Sectarians allegedly lived here before, who worshipped all kinds of spirits, deities and various otherworldly forces, did their dark deeds and shed a lot of innocent blood. People, I've strayed too far from the topic. Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, a certain scientist, I won't say his name, because I don't know, decided that it would be nice to check all the legends for truthfulness, and came to live in the local forest. I built myself a shack. Not bad, by the way. Well, let's get there now. Check it out. I brought the most necessary things with me and began to explore the surrounding areas, while writing down all the research in my diary. No one knows what became of him, and his body has never been found. In the mid-90s, my father was hiding from the bandos here in these parts. I don't know what he did or why they were looking for him. Apparently he got involved with the wrong people, but he was in serious danger. It so happened that he stumbled upon this hut, so he sat here for a long time until everything settled down. The diet consisted mainly of mushrooms, berries, and sometimes they were lucky to catch some game, in the form of a hare or deer. He also sometimes indulged himself with fish, as there was a pond nearby, small but not quite tiny, from which water could be safely consumed, so his father's life gradually improved. He liked this house so much that he decided to patch it up and put it in order, changed the rotten cladding, fixed the roof, and the like. When everything calmed down more or less, and they forgot about him, or thought that his corpse had already rotted somewhere in the swamp, my father returned to the city, settled his life, got married, and then I was born. However, every summer he went here and spent time here. If not 2, then a month for sure. And I could not understand why this place attracted him like a magnet. So, and the scientist, what's with him and what did you tell me about him? Andriuka asked, once again hitting me in the face with a branch. Bastard, I thought to myself and hissed, but continued to walk in silence and keep up. Oh, yes, the scientist. Anyway, Dad found something there. Some notes, journals, studies of this place and various phenomena. And where is all this? I already asked the question, gradually speeding up my pace to get around Andre, who was already getting tired of me. Yes, they got lost somehow, but my father told me a lot about them, said Velerka, and then added. But one day he told me something that at first I laughed, thinking that he was joking. But when I saw his face, I realized that humor was not appropriate in this case. So what are you waiting for? We are listening carefully, Andrew squeaked joyfully, like a boy who asks his grandfather to tell another story. Okay, I'll try to convey everything in his words. It will be easier this way. That summer turned out to be extremely hot, as a result of which many forest fires broke out. However, the area where the hut is located was miraculously avoided by the fire, and even the huge clouds of smoke that enveloped entire cities and regions did not penetrate into this territory. Some will call this phenomenon a miracle, others will say damn. But the fact that this case is unusual is a fact. I spent my time enjoying myself, hunting, picking mushrooms and just strolling through the forest, enjoying the local beauty and nature. One unremarkable evening, I decided to set traps, hoping to feast on some game. Well, I set about 5 traps and with a calm soul went to the hut to cook dinner and mind my own business. The sun was slowly sinking towards the horizon, and the forest was gradually shrouded in darkness. Sitting at the table, I was cleaning my gun and trying to tune the radio to at least some kind of wave, when suddenly, through the static and hissing, I heard a howl that made my hair stand on end. There was deathly silence for about half a minute, and then the same howl rang out again, only this time much louder and scarier. I quickly grabbed everything I needed and ran outside. I had a flashlight in one hand and a rifle in the other. Sighing heavily, I took a step forward, and at the same moment I felt a strange smell, even a stench. It smelled of rot, decaying flesh, and death, and I could feel it in my bones. As I stood there and shone the flashlight in all directions, hoping to see something, I heard the clink of chains very close by, with which I tied the traps to the nearest trees. At that moment, I realized one thing. The one who got into the trap could not get out of it, but he somehow managed to break the chain and is currently moving towards me at great speed. I ran into the hut, locked the door with all the available locks and lay low, trying not to even breathe. Very soon, there was a blow on the door with such force that it seemed to me that it would fly out along with the hinges, and what was on the other side would just come in and tear me apart. But the door miraculously survived, and then the uninvited guest switched to the window, which, by the way, he tore down with one blow and began to crawl into the house. I was scared out of my mind. My hands were shaking like they were from Parkinson's disease, and a lump formed in my throat. Something was already inside the room. I could hear it clearly, but I was afraid to come out of hiding. Even the double-barreled shotgun, which I hugged all the time, did not give me confidence. The creature growled, and everything inside me shrank. And when it was very close, I took a desperate step. Jumping out of hiding, I shone the flashlight in the creature's face, thereby blinding it, hoping to gain some time, and I began to move towards the door, trying to leave the hut. Words cannot describe what was in the same room with me and stood literally 2 meters away from me. It was not a man or even a beast. It was something not from our world. a huge head with many limbs and appendages sticking out of it, from a distance resembling underdeveloped human hands, huge round eyes with dark red veins, and I swear that each of them had 3 pupils, a huge mouth, from which protruded large curved fangs, similar to elephant tusks, as well as an uncountable number of small sharp teeth. The freak had 3 legs, but they grew disproportionately to the body, as if some crazy doctor had randomly sewn them to the body. One of them had one of my traps on it. In addition, the monster possessed a powerful paws that reached almost to the ground. I was backing away and watching the whole picture, but I couldn't figure out how or where this creature came from in our world. At one point, the fiend of hell made an attempt to pounce on me, but good reaction and preparation made themselves felt, and I managed to pull the trigger before it did so. The bullet hit the chest area, causing the geek to fall to the floor, while breaking several floorboards with his carcass, but unfortunately, the creature turned out to be faster than I expected, and before I could blink, it was already picking up speed and moving towards me. The second shot was very unsuccessful. The bullet hit the creature's fang, thereby causing virtually no damage to the creature. I should have taken turbine bullets, not this. The thought flashed through my mind at the moment when the monster was already a step away from me. With one easy movement, he broke my arm, in which I was holding the gun in the forearm area, and then grabbed me by the neck and lifted me to arm's length, staring intently into my eyes. Mentally, I had already managed to say goodbye to my life several times, but when the creature was about to bite off my head, I remembered about the knife that was attached to my belt. Taking it out, I abruptly raised my hand and plunged the knife into the monster's left eye, after which I felt my ribs break against the wall when the creature threw me with incredible force, then jumped out of the already broken window with a knife in my head and disappeared. I made several attempts to get up, but it was all in vain. My body did not obey at all, and the pain was such that I sobbed, howling like a wolf. A few minutes later, I lost consciousness. "That's the story," said Valurka and became quiet. "And what's next?" Andre asked, and it was obvious that he had received a lot of impressions from the story. And then nothing happened. My father came to himself the next evening, managed to provide himself with first aid, and the next morning he reached the city, where doctors took care of him. "I get it," I said. "What is it?" my 2 companions asked in surprise. I understood why he came here every summer. "And why is that?" Andre asked in disbelief, looking at me as if I were a fool. "I was hunting that thing," I replied, noting that we had already reached the goal. "By the way, here it is. Isn't it beautiful?" Valera said, proudly spreading his arms out to the sides. Indeed, the hut was quite large and well maintained, as if it were not a hut at all, but a real cottage. Next to it was a small shed, which, apparently, contained tools and other equipment, as well as an outdoor toilet. "Anyway, I'll take care of the generator. You, Andrew, will put a little order in the house, and Sanik will take care of cooking meat and other snacks. Any questions?" Valera said, picking in his pocket in search of the keys to the huge lock that prevented us from entering. Interior of the house. "No questions," I said, and almost immediately everyone began to perform their duties. After about 2 hours, everything was done, and we were sitting around the campfire with our stomachs full, discussing various topics and just enjoying nature and the wonderful atmosphere. "You didn't come here for a vacation, did you?" I asked Valerie a question, at the moment when Andrew went to get rid of the drinks he had drunk earlier. "You're not fooled," he replied and smiled. "Is that thing bothering you?" I continued. "Not exactly like that. My dad dealt with those evil spirits. That monster is the creation of that scientist. I have no doubt about it, and believe me, this is far from his only experiment. Who knows what other creatures roam these places, hiding, waiting. and perhaps even currently watching us from the impenetrable thicket. Besides, let's just say that the researcher has enough anomalies and oddities here, which is exactly what I warned you about before I went to this place. So I do not advise you to leave our modest possessions at night. Valera gave out, poured glasses, and continued. And again, you yourself wanted thrills, dreamed of visiting places that give you goosebumps and horror. Here you are. When he returned, Andrew said that he didn't feel well, and that he would probably go get ready for bed, or turn on some Kinzo on his laptop, which he had downloaded in advance. But we just nodded and continued to chat about all sorts of nonsense. By the time it was completely dark, we were pleased with the decision to join our friend and check on him at the same time. When we entered one of the rooms, the following picture appeared to our eyes. Andrew was sitting on the floor, with his back to the exit and his face to the wall. He was shaking, as if he had spent a day in the bitter cold, and when I got closer, I noticed clumps of grey hair on his head. We never got a clear answer to our questions about what happened, and our friend just mumbled and swayed from side to side. I was so concerned about my friend's behavior that it took me a moment to notice that in front of him on the wooden floor was an old video recorder and an equally ancient Sharp TV from the 90s, which displayed white noise on the screen. Valera barked at Andrewka, who wasn't paying any attention to us, but was just staring at one point. Realizing that this would achieve nothing, he came up and gave the juicy bream to an inadequate comrade, after which he immediately came to his senses. "This just can't be happening," Valera said in a frightened voice. "My father brought this electronics here along with the generator after my mother's death, and after a certain point in time it disappeared. Where does this come from?" The owner of the house repeated the question. "I thought you were kidding me," Andre replied in a trembling voice. When I entered the room, I noticed pointing arrows on the floor, which, as it seemed to me, were marked with something similar to blood, slimy and nasty, and led me straight to this wall, where this equipment was lying. There was a tape on the video, and my name was written on it in the same trash as on the floor. "So I thought it was your doing. What did you see there?" I asked. "I was there. I was in that video, damn it. The footage clearly shows me leaving the hut and running away, stumbling, falling, then getting up again and continuing to run through the forest, while someone chases me and takes me off my back, but I couldn't see who it was. Several times I turned around and my face got into the frame, which was distorted in a terrible grimace. After a while, I fell exhausted into the bushes, and literally immediately someone invisible penetrated into that very shrub, breaking branches and rustling leaves. And then there was a terrible scream. I was shouting, the one in the video, and a moment later everything went quiet. The cameraman brought the camera closer to my face, and there, tears rolled down his cheek, and Andre put his hands to his head and howled. I wanted to tell him to continue, but Valera stopped me, gesturing that we needed to move away to talk. We went into the kitchen. I lit a cigarette, and my friend poured himself a glass, drank, and immediately poured himself a second. "He's a dead man," he said, and then angrily threw a bottle at the wall, the fragments of which scattered throughout the room. "What are you talking about?" I shouted at him. "You don't understand. He saw his death, saw what was going to happen to him in the near future. The moment he inserted the tape into the VCR, he found himself ready to die. For this, we would like to thank our scientist, who did his best. I don't know how or how he managed it, but he was able to encase the ancient evil in electrical appliances. I can't say which device was the original carrier of this spirit or what it is. All I know is that it can change the carrier. Imagine that it was enclosed in an ancient camera. Then more modern technology appeared, and this entity, or whatever it was, moved itself from one device to another. It is cunning and insidious, capable of causing confusion, creating illusions and deception. It will try to lure you, force you to do what it craves so much. If he succeeded, you're dead, and no one can help you anymore. That's all I know about it. All that my father told me about this phenomenon. And one more thing, if you watch the video, you'll see how you're going to die. And no matter how hard you try to change anything, you won't succeed. The ending is always the same, the one on the tape. But we didn't look, so we're safe. I said, "You're wrong, my friend." As I said before, it will do everything to ensure that we do exactly what it needs. Hallucinations, visions and other horror provided for us. So get ready, Valera added, resting his back against the wall and sighing heavily. Is there really no way out of this situation? I sat down on a chair and put my hands on my head. Yes, my friend replied. The only way out is to survive until dawn. But to be honest, I'm sure we won't be able to stand it. But we'll try, I muttered. And at that moment I noticed a shadow scurrying down the corridor. Don't worry, you won't help him, Valera said at the moment when I was going to get out and catch up with Andrew. A moment later, the front door slammed shut, and through the open windows we could hear someone's quick footsteps, followed by a dull sound like a sack of potatoes being dropped on asphalt, followed by the same footsteps, which gradually receded further and further away. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a terrible scream that startled me, and then there was silence. It's all my fault. His death is on my conscience. I knew that I shouldn't have come here, that I shouldn't have agreed to this. I knew that this place is full of evil spirits, and it's an anomaly. Why did I do it? Valera covered his face with his hands and sobbed. You're right, but alas, he can't be brought back, but we can try to survive on our own. We need to stick together. Then our chances may be slight, but they increase. So let's better think about what to do next, I said, and he nodded approvingly. We need to try to blow this shit to hell, I summed up, and we carefully, with small steps, headed towards that room. And when we entered it, I noticed that there were 2 cassettes on the VCR, the inscriptions on which said that they were intended for us. There was another oddity. Neither the TV nor the video were connected to the power supply, and I did not understand how they, in principle, perform their functions without electricity. As I got closer, I grabbed the TV and threw it at the wall. However, to my surprise and regret, no changes have occurred. It's useless, said my friend and sat down on the couch. But I followed his example. We need to sit out the rest of the night, and then we'll stay alive. At least 5 hours before dawn. Be strong, my friend. Then the following began to happen. I began to see and hear things that couldn't possibly be there. Creepy inscriptions appeared on the wall, then on the ceiling, and right behind my back someone whispered, "You're mine." I jerked and turned around, but as expected, I found no one there. As it turned out, Valera also saw and felt something, but with some differences, and we realized that each of us had our own nightmare in store. Somewhere to my left, something growled, and behind me I heard a nasty sound like bones crunching. Thick black liquid dripping from the ceilings and walls, which got on my clothes, face, and eyes, and I could literally smell the stench in the room. In an instant, the lights went out, plunging us into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the TV screen, which all the time displayed the same white noise. And sometimes there were some creepy images. Someone grabbed my leg and dragged me towards the door, and I was kicking, clinging to the wooden floor, tearing off my nails, screaming at the top of my voice, asking Valera to help. But he just looked at me, and I began to notice how his face was distorted in a terrible inhuman smile. The skin on his face, it was as if his face had been ripped off and then put back on, crookedly and unevenly. Something that grabbed me started gnawing at my leg, tearing off large chunks of flesh with sharp claws and thrusting them into its mouth. while I screamed and writhed in pain, and then lost consciousness. I jumped up from the couch in horror and grabbed my leg, feeling it and realizing that everything was fine. There were no wounds or injuries. Everything that I had just experienced was nothing but an illusion, but so true that anyone would have mistaken it for reality. Valera was sitting next to him and, apparently, his mind was somewhere out there in nightmares, and his gaze was empty. My friend stared at one point and for several minutes did not blink even once. I felt a light breeze, and when I turned around, I saw a strange, incomprehensible creature climbing towards me through the window. Along with his appearance, the room was filled with insects, nasty and ugly, which tried to get into my mouth, nose and ears. What had entered the room resembled a human, but only the upper part. The lower one looked more like a huge caterpillar, on which many small limbs could be seen, on which the creature moved. In an instant, the creature grabbed my arm and broke it at the elbow, bending it in the opposite direction. I screamed, but immediately received a powerful blow to the stomach, and then the creature stuck its paw in my mouth and tore off my lower jaw with a crunch. Blood poured out in a stream, and the creature pointed with a pathetic semblance of a finger at the video recorder, on which there was only one tape. Valurka. A thought flashed through my head, and then I came to my senses. And just like that time, I was sitting on the couch, and everything that was happening was another deception. I don't know what nightmares my friend had to go through, but he couldn't stand it and still watch the recording that was meant for him. He sat next to me and looked humbly in front of him. "Andrew is waiting for me. Goodbye, my friend," he said, and then got up, threw me the car keys and headed towards the exit. When the front door opened, I heard a terrible scream and the sounds of tearing flesh. Then the door slammed shut and silence fell. I'm the only one left in this damn place. But I still persevered and met the dawn alive and unharmed. But I will never forget what I had to go through. Those creepy creatures and creatures, those worlds and dimensions, the pain, fear and hopelessness that I experienced that night will remain forever in my memories, and will torment me at night more than once. I left the cabin that morning, but before that I burned it too. Hell, it's the right thing to do. I ran through the forest, gasping for breath, scratching my face with branches, stumbling and falling, but I didn't want to give up. At a certain point, I managed to get on the track, and then I reached the place where we left the car. I was saved, but at what cost? 3 days after those events, I found a strange folder in my smartphone, and in it was a video file called for Alex.